It is now 6 o'clock and I would like to start this meeting. My name is Mike Fletcher and I will be chairing the meeting. And I would like to remind everybody that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the Council's website. So I'll go to our first agenda. Apologies for absence. I think everybody's here, to be honest, so I'm not assuming we've got any apologies. We can move on from that one. Agenda item 2, minutes of the last meeting. And I'd like to move that the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 4th of June be approved as a correct record. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes before we go to that motion? No? Okay, so may I move that the minutes are a correct record, and Steve, you're seconding? Lovely. Item 3, items of urgent business. I've not agreed any urgent items of business for tonight. Item 4, any declarations of interest. So, Councillor Sisterson, please let us know.
Just to declare, I'm ward councillor for items 9 and items 10. If that's, I'm not sure you need to declare that. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Councillor, and worth pointing out that we don't require you to recuse yourself from that, just to demonstrate that you're prepared to listen to both sides of the argument. Okay, declarations of receipts. I would like to check if anybody has had any correspondence or meetings or discussions relevant to the determination of any planning application or enforcement action to be resolved at this meeting. If any of that sentence makes sense to anybody, have you had any meetings or correspondence that could impact tonight? Councillor Lydiard.
I think we all got an email, did we not, from the King's Farm application, was it?
Okay, for you, Chair. So I have not seen this email.
Apologies, Ash. I did say I'd send it to you. I will pass it across. I think we will. My recommendation is that we set that correspondence aside. I think the response that I am aware of from at least 2 of you has been that we would rather discuss the issue on the night rather than have any further correspondence or lobbying. So if you're okay, that is our approach. Agreed. Thank you. So item 6, planning appeals. I'm not aware of any planning appeals for tonight. Ash?
Yeah, for you, Chair. There's no report for appeals this meeting. We'll bring a report at the next committee. Members, thank you.
Thank you. Now, item 7 is our first application to review. Before we move on to that item, members, you've been provided with an addendum that's been produced to cover both items 7 and 8 on the agenda. Picks up on matters since the agenda was published. A copy of this has also been tabled this evening. First thing I'm going to ask is, would you like a few minutes to read through those, or are you happy to pick those up as we go through the 2 items? Yeah? Should we give you about 5 minutes to go through and... I'll go through. Oh, right. I think we'll need you to use your little red button to...
I'm not very good with buttons, sorry. No, all I'm saying is I've read it and I'm assuming that most of the other councillors have, and in which case, doubtless, whoever's presenting it as the officer will probably refer into it at the time. I'm just thinking of saving time, that's all. Thanks.
Is everybody else in agreement? Excellent, so we'll carry on. Thank you. So, item 7 is land for development on Muckingford Road, East Tilbury. And can I ask Elizabeth Reynolds to present, please? Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just prepare to share my screen with the presentation. Hopefully everyone can see that on the screen. No. So we're just waiting for the link to show up. Is that work? Is that working on your screen?
It's on, so I think
Okay.
it's give it a go.
I can see it on my screen. I just want to make sure that that's okay for everyone else. That's minimised. Okay. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'll be providing an overview of this outline application reference 16/01232 OUT for East Tilbury. The purpose of the presentation is to explain the context of the proposal and the assessment. The full assessment of the application on behalf of the Planning Service is provided within the committee agenda and report, and it's supplemented by the addendum, and I'm happy to go through that and answer any questions if you have them. So to begin with, let's have a look at the site location. So the site forms a C shape, effectively, of land running from Linford around to the western side of East Tilbury. And it's crossed by Muckingford Road and the railway line. This aerial image gives you an indication that the site is currently used mostly for agricultural purposes and is surrounded by a mix of predominantly residential and industrial uses, being adjacent to the Thames Industrial Park, and to the southwest of the site, EMR Metals Recycling, that's the one, yep. And then in terms of residential land uses, there's the settlements of Linford to the north, East Tilbury predominantly here, and a small section of Barton Mews down in this part of the site. Locally, there is more land that's used for farming. There's also a quarry.
Apologies, Elizabeth. I'm a little hard of hearing.
Yep.
Would you mind
Yep, sorry.
just coming closer to the?
Yeah,
Thank you.
further to the north of the...
I believe you should have a version on your screens in front of you. So best we can do for the minute, folks, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that should work. Yeah, okay. Apologies for that. It's an interesting hybrid with Teams and Adobe trying to work together, and me. The site context, as I was saying, is predominantly agricultural around the site, but we do have the settlements of East Tilbury and Linford. There's also a quarry and EMR Metals Recycling down here, local shops and services in East Tilbury, the Thames Industrial Park. Yeah, that's now. Okay. So surrounding the site are a number of existing amenities. This is a map that was taken from the Design and Access Statement application documents, and includes the location of existing nurseries in light blue, primary schools, including at East Tilbury in mid blue, and secondary schools. It also shows the proximity to the fort southeast of the site. This plan shows the context of the Lower Thames crossing, which places this application in an unusual situation of having two different development scenarios. So due to the proposed Lower Thames crossing having either permanent or temporary acquisition rights if approved, which we're still awaiting a decision on, the applicant has amended their description of development to include scenario 1, in which case Lower Thames Crossing goes ahead and up to 830 dwellings would be approved, or scenario 2, in the world in which Lower Thames Crossing does not proceed, up to 1,000 dwellings, and the environmental statement covers that upper range. Yes.
Would you mind terribly if we keep questions until after
It's
the
not a
presentation?
question. The people in the public gallery can't hear. They're indicating to me they can't hear.
Right. Thanks, appreciate that. We will do our
Okay,
best.
apologies.
I think we're struggling a bit tonight.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I was just explaining the Lower Thames Crossing has presented 2 different scenarios for this application. The first being a scenario in which Lower Thames Crossing proceeds and 830 dwellings would be approved, and then scenario 2, the situation in which Lower Thames Crossing does not go ahead, up to 1,000 dwellings. This map shows an indicative location of existing utilities in the area, including a thick purple line, which is an indicative location for a high transmission gas pipeline, which is referred to in one of the reasons for refusal. These are some contextual photos just to show the existing site condition, looking from Princess Margaret Road towards the Thames Industrial Estate, previously the Barter Estate, and in the foreground, Barter Mews. The site is partly this section of land here, taken off Princess Margaret Road. This is another site photo to give you an example of the view looking from the open recreational space, looking towards the rail line. This is close to the location of the proposed overbridge. The design and access statement includes an illustrative plan indicating the position of the overbridge and shows an example of a bridge. These pages give an indication from the design and access statement of illustrative sketches for what the proposed scheme could come forward in terms of appearance, scale and layout, though these matters are reserved for later determination because this is an outline application. I'll now go through the parameter plans for the scheme. These are documents that are for approval, and what I've done is put them split screen so you can see option 1 and option 2 side by side. So as you can see in option 1, the northwest corner of the site is effectively removed from the development because it would be permanently acquired for the Lower Thames Crossing. The areas in light brown are residential and the areas in green are public open space. There is an indication of a school being located towards the centre of the northern part of the site. This is the rail line here, and the overbridge would extend approximately in this location. Please keep in mind that these are for approval, though they include no measurements. They are to scale, but they do give us an indication of areas, though no minimums or maximums. The image on the right is in option 2, so that's a non-Lower Thames Crossing scenario in which the development extends north of Muckingford Road. This next plan looks at the landscape framework. Landscape details would be approved through a process of reserve matters, but this gives an indication of where open space, sustainable drainage and landscaped areas would be located in both scenarios 1 and 2. These 2 plans give an indication of scale and heights, with the darkest red colours giving an indication of maximum building heights, including in the location that's proposed for the school. The building heights generally range up to 3 stories. I'll now go through some of the view modelling that was provided by the applicant. So this is to look at landscape and visual impact assessments, and it includes wire lines. So a number of these are available in the public application documents, but I'll just look at views number 2, which is taken from in Linford, from Muckingford Road, looking west-southwest, and view number 12, which is looking into the site east. This is an example of view number 2 with the indicative scale shown in dashed red, and then a theoretical example of what the massing of a scheme could look like beneath that. It's then followed by an example of what the indicative scheme could look like if it was mitigated with planting. So the view number 2 that was labelled on the previous image, taken here, this is looking west. This is the existing context. This is the theoretical proposal with the wire line as the red maximum. And this is what the same view could look like with mitigation measures like planting to screen some of the proposed development. View number 12, looking east, as existing across the site. View 12, showing a dashed red line with an indicative building envelope, indicative massing of what could come forward with the housing, and then a red solid line for the proposed Tilbury overbridge. Again, this is an indicative image of what it would look like if mitigation planting were introduced, including in winter. So and that's to show how that view would effectively be screened by vegetation. So in summary, the proposed outline application, as I said, contains 2 possible scenarios. Scenario 1 for 830 dwellings and scenario 2 for 1,000 dwellings if the Lower Thames crossing is not implemented. All matters are reserved except for access. The proposals include a new bridge over the railway, provision of a primary school, local centre, landscaped open space and affordable housing at 12 to 27% of the total depending on the scenario. So 12% being the Lower Thames crossing scenario and 27% being scenario 2. The council has undertaken a review of the viability, and that indicates that the affordable housing offer could be higher, theoretically 23% for scenario 1 or 35%, which is a policy compliant for scenario 2. The application is currently subject to an appeal against non-determination and will be heard at public inquiry in October. So this application is being put to you in the context of seeking your resolution, and that resolution will guide officers through the appeal process. The recommendation for the planning committee is to refuse planning permission for the reasons set out within the officer's report, and these would form the case for the council at the planning appeal. And that's it. Thank you. Oh yes, and if you'd like, I can just briefly explain the addendum. This covers consultation responses and representations made subsequent to publication of the committee report. So 2 consultation responses have been received since the report was published. One was an objection on the basis of access to the site, additional traffic, as the roads into Linford appear to be unclassified. We then, and then we also have, further grounds of objection on environmental pollution, the scheme being out of character, loss of amenity by building on the Greenbelt, and the road bridge needing to be provided first. There is additionally a letter of support from DP World, which hadn't previously been uploaded to the website and is recorded here. And this letter of support said that the scheme would contribute to the residential needs of growing their workforce, provide a need for balanced growth in Thurrock, and saying that the number of freight trains is likely to increase over coming years, so the need for the bridge for access to East Tilbury is recognised. We've then received additional consultation responses from the Health and Safety Executive and National Gas, and these relate to the purple pipeline that I showed you on the utilities plan. On the 5th of July, we received an updated representation that advises against granting planning permission on safety grounds. And this is on the basis that conditions will be required to control land use and layout to ensure that the development is safe to proceed and protects their assets, the assets of National Gas. HSE have meant the timing of this objection has meant that there hasn't been time to resolve these matters with the applicant, but they will be addressed throughout the appeal process. And I think that's all to explain on there, but happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Before we go to questions, what I'd like to do is to ask the three individuals who have made statements to come down and find yourselves a seat. I believe we have three. One statement in favour of the application from Ben Coles. One statement of objection from a member of the public, Andrew Halcrow, and one statement of objection from Councillor Fraser Massey. So if the three gentlemen would like to come down and find yourselves a place, we'll explain to you how to use these strange-looking microphones. Yeah, please feel free to. So just to explain to you, what we will do is we'll ask you each to make a statement of no more than 3 minutes. We're not going to buzz you or anything, but please bear that in mind. We will then ask members of the committee to ask questions, but only on matters of fact. They won't be debating your statement with you. Okay? So what I'd like to do first is to invite Andrew Halcrow to make your statement. If you press the button on the right in front of you, it goes red, and so does the top of the... There you go.
Excellent. Hello.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair, can I just jump in there? Sorry, Mike, you're right, sorry. I've just seen that bit there. I might need to speak to legal. DP World have obviously put in a letter of support. I'm employed by Dubai Ports World. Could you just have some advice from legal there on that one? Thank you.
Hold, please, caller. We'll come back to you in a second.
Cheers, thank you. Apologies.
Sorry, Andrew, we'll get back to you.
Councillor, I think as long as you're willing to approach the application with an open mind and hear both sides of the argument, there's no problem with you continuing and voting on this proposal.
Okay, thank you. Cheers. Just wanted to check.
Thanks, Councillor. Andrew, please go ahead.
Thank you. I chose to live in Linford 35, 36 years ago because of its semi-rural setup. It's not like Grays or Tilbury or South Ockenden, and the whole reason I chose that area was because of that. The problem we have there is if the proposal did go ahead, it's going to have a negative effect on nature and the surrounding area, and also it's going to be a high impact on the highway safety. The Muckingford Road running from Cross Keys down to St George's, the George pub, is a small, well, narrow lane, and an extra 1,000 houses and the cars associated with that coming onto that road would cause major problems. There's a bottleneck anyway at the other end, down at the George pub, where you've got the mini roundabout and leads onto the level crossing. So in rush hour times, it's a nightmare at this moment in time to get in and out. So ultimately, an additional 1,000 houses with the associated cars would cause more problems to the local residents. As I say, the overall effect would probably reduce the property values in the area, and ultimately that's my objection.
Thank you, Andrew. Well put and very brief as well, thank you. Fraser, if I might ask you to make your statement, and then Ben will ask you to make yours. Sorry, which of you gentlemen is Ben? I'm looking at... Right, I don't want to look like I'm cross-eyed.
Councillor, sorry, just to interrupt. I'm actually going to be asking Ian Anderson to give a presentation, and I'm here for any questions as arise.
All right, so the part of Ben will be played by Ian.
Very well, I'm sure.
Thank you. Fraser.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Committee. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Thurrock Planning Officers for a very good, detailed 116-page report in relation to this application. I agree with most of all the reasons to recommend refusal. This application has been in the planning system since 2016 and has finally reappeared with two options depending on the significant national infrastructure project, the Lower Thames Crossing. The East Tilbury ward has in the last decade seen hundreds of new homes built on the greenbelt of the surrounding area. Hundreds more are already approved, not yet built. The infrastructure recommended to support these new homes is not fully in place, so predicting what the area would require with perhaps another 830 homes is guesswork. We have not seen the full mitigation of the existing developments. Our greenbelt and agricultural land has already been taken away. This application in such a vast development would change the character of a semi-rural location forever, bringing significant harm to the greenbelt with little in the way of very special circumstance. The only real positive of this application would seem to be building of a road bridge over the railway, which is something I'm sure it would appeal to many. That bridge would be very expensive. It makes me worry it would be delayed. And even when in place, the cars would still basically be using the cross keys at Chadwell and the Jordan Dragon roundabout. These are both not ideal junctions and can struggle with traffic already using them. If you add 830 houses, with many households in Thurrock owning 2 cars, this could mean an extra 1,500 cars a day on the local road network. If a bridge road was to extend through Muckingford Road and to join the local road network at the top of Buckingham Hill, using existing Holford Lane, this would create a true Linford bypass and bring cars into the network with more options, but that is not what is in this planning application and is proposing. And although a 2-form primary school is included in the application, there is no agreement with the Council's education team for the delivery of such a school, and the existing primary school is already full. Secondary school pupils have no sustainable transport means, effectively meaning more buses on already busy roads and lanes. I understand the NHS does not wish to build a new medical centre in relation to these plans, and the money contribution will be absorbed into the NHS. But even with current population numbers in the ward, the local medical centres can really struggle, and I do worry how they would cope with 1,000 more residents looking to use medical services. The area has a lot of older residents who would like to stay in the area, would like to have the option to have more sustainable, suitable properties available to them. This would free up larger housing stock and allow these residents to stay in the area where they feel supported and comfortable, but nothing in these plans would solve this problem. The ward remains one of the very few in Thurrock without specially catered housing for older residents. The ward has seen much in the way of dust, noise and air pollution in the past, with landfills, quarrying to name just 2. And the construction relating to these new homes would lead to more noise, dust and air pollution. And if the Lower Thames Crossing does go ahead, many of these new homes will be right on the doorstep, which will add to the existing issues. With the Norwich to Tilbury pylons, Lower Thames Crossing and the Orset Quarry all still to be determined, if all were approved and this application was approved, it would turn a lot of the ward into a long operating hours building site for what could be a decade, with quarry into the north for decades more. East Tilbury has already suffered decades HGV and greenbelt being lost. And decades later, we are still recovering. And for these reasons, I cannot support this planning application.
Thanks, Fraser. Right. I appreciate that I probably should have asked members to, if they wanted to ask either of the statement makers any questions on matters of fact. Are you happy for me to ask Ian to make his statement and then to come back to you? Thanks. Ian, the floor is yours. You're not on yet, mate. Press the right-hand button. Oh, you've got a dead one. Sorry. There you go.
Second time lucky, hopefully. Chair, committee, thank you for your attention. You might ask whether there is much to be gained from debating the development proposals now that the Chief Planning Inspector will preside over an appeal in October. I would respectfully suggest that the need has never been greater. You are a new committee of a new administration. We have a new government elected with a clear mandate for change, for growth, for investment, for house building, for Greenbelt review. The last time we saw such a profound change of government was in 1997, the same year that Thurrock last allocated a site for development. Mulberry has waited for the local plan to catch up. It has also waited for its planning application to be determined. 8 years is a long time for an application to go undecided, regardless of the circumstances, especially when the site is identified for residential development in your draft plan. Your office's report suggests that there are no very special circumstances to justify the development. With respect, that belies the facts. Thurrock has no local plan. It has no pipeline of housing sites and less than 1 year's housing land supply. It has an affordable housing crisis and a homelessness issue. Paradoxically, it has the characteristics for growth that a city region would crave. The opportunity to harness investment from the Thames Freeport that could result in £10 billion worth of investment if it provides the homes to accommodate the workforce. It is a situation that this government will take notice of. It is a compelling component of a national growth strategy. Thurrock has a choice, to be open or closed for business. Being open would see your authority recognise the overwhelming need to say yes to this development, to agree a statement of common ground with Mulberry, to work collaboratively on a Section 106 legal agreement that can address the issues presented as reasons for refusal, and to ask the inspector to grant planning permission for up to 1,000 homes with associated infrastructure, not least a railway bridge to serve the community of East Tilbury. Saying no means an adversarial appeal, that there are no circumstances where it would allow residential development before the adoption of a local plan, not just on this site, but across the borough. An 8-day public inquiry at huge expense to both parties, where the factual inaccuracies made in the officer's report will be scrutinised, where the complete disregard of the need to align homes to jobs will be played out in a public arena, where a continued reliance on Greenbelt to justify a lack of any proactive plan making or decision taking will be laid to bear, where all eyes will be on Thurrock. Mulberry want to deliver a scheme that we can all be proud of, but surely the time has also come to ask, if not this site, where? And if not now, when? Respectfully, Chair, we ask the committee to overturn your officer's recommendation and show that Thurrock is ready to lead on its growth agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Members, would anybody like to ask any of our speakers any questions of a factual nature? Councillor Byrne?
Two questions. What comes first, the bridge or the build?
The scheme's ultimately going to have to be phased. So the plans which we've prepared and part of the submission indicate phasing, which will be in a south direction. So we'll start north, and ultimately the bridge will be delivered as part of the first phases within that scheme.
You haven't answered what comes first, the build or the bridge.
The two will be delivered in parallel, but dwellings will need to be delivered before the bridge. But there'll be no homes delivered on the southern part of the development before the bridge is delivered.
Okay, and the other one is, what is the price of an affordable 4-bedroom house?
Could you just repeat the question in terms of an affordable 4-bedroom house? There's a lot of factors which depend on that. I'm sorry, say again? No, I mean, if you're talking about affordable housing as a component, significantly less. So there'll be various types of tenures, like with most development schemes. Some will be for rental and some will be discounted market. But I think the type of value you've just suggested is probably reflective of a market property in the area. Yeah. Sorry, was there a follow-up question?
You haven't put, what is the price of an affordable 4-bedroom house? You haven't answered my question.
There'll be 70% of the units as social rented, and the 30% will be shared ownership. So it'll be prices dictated by your council.
So it's going to be at least 400,000, isn't it?
Well, no, there'll be private units,
right,
and then there'll be affordable units. So the affordable units, 70% of those will be social rented. 30% will be shared ownership.
There's 4-bedroom, isn't it? 10% 4-bedroom, market and affordable units, percentage terms, 10%?
So but the actual quota within that will be the price of those units. The 70% that are social rented will be dictated by your authority.
So, yeah, 400,000. Okay, yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. C. Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things you were talking about or alluding to is that it's an imperative that this site is developed, and then there's the notice from DP World saying they need people. But interestingly, there's no mention of any other sites that may or may not have been considered. Have any other sites been considered?
You'll appreciate from Mulberry's perspective, their interests are their own. But in terms of the sites that the local plan is considering, this is one of those sites. So this is a site that your authority has already identified in its draft plan as a housing site.
Well, thank you. I was under the impression that part of it might be, but the other part isn't.
I would agree with you, the boundaries are broad, but in terms of the site that we're promoting, it's one that's in the emerging local plan.
Potentially once the local plan's agreed.
Yeah, and of course that's part of the problem, isn't it? That we are in a planning vacuum. There isn't a local plan, but the housing need escalates every year.
I think the last time I looked it up was 3 years ago, but in Thurrock over the last 10 years, over 50% of the houses that have been put up for sale have not been sold to local residents. So what that tells you is there's a huge influx of residents.
Thanks, gentlemen. I think we're getting beyond questions of a factual nature,
thank you anyway.
So that will form part of the debate, I'm sure. Councillor Lydiard? Sorry, I thought you wanted to. Okay. So I can assume then that you have got all the factual information you need from our speakers. Thank you very much, speakers. You may return to your seats, and thank you for your time. So what members will probably also want to do is ask questions of our planning officer. It's quite a detailed report, and I'm sure there are a number of points that may or may not be of particular interest to you. So may I ask that you direct your questions to Elizabeth. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much, Chair. So my question was on highways. Obviously, as mentioned, some of this site is in the upcoming local plan. So we have to be prepared for, let's just say this is approved or rejected, we would have to be prepared for a potential site coming in. Obviously, you've not got enough information on highways, but what's your sort of opinion on, I'd say, option one, which is slightly smaller, Lower Thames Crossing? Do you think it would potentially be manageable, or actually, no, this is probably not the right location? But bearing in mind, this has been a site that's been located in the local plan, so somewhere along the line, we've obviously looked at this and said, there's potential for development there, and it is a huge parcel of land in the local plan. Over to yourself, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You've got to look at it. We look at things differently, obviously, in respect of the local plan and in respect of individual planning applications. And this is where the difficulty lies, because obviously when developments come in as a group of developments, say there were more than just this development on the local plan within East Tilbury, then we would have to look at those strategically all together and their impact all together. So this has come in as an individual application, so it's a lot harder to assess in terms of how it might be overall if a significant development took place within East Tilbury. But it's quite clear within our report that we've still got concerns whether it's option one or option two in regards to this application on highway terms.
Councillor Kelly, is that okay for you? Apologies, I was making another point at the time. Any other members have any questions for Elizabeth or for any of the officers? Steve.
Thank you, Chair. When I read through this today and I look at the potentially where this, what's described as a spine road would run, what crosses my mind as is that that road by default would become the main road, because the people that are in East Tilbury or even in the south of the railway line are likely to go through and use that, in my opinion, and because of the gate shutting, exactly as the resident pointed out, and the sort of queues of traffic. So has that been considered in the scale of the spine road?
I might defer back to Julian for this, but essentially it will be open to the public. It will be a public road. But
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we did discuss a number of scenarios with the applicant, and one of those potentially was that all the traffic from East Tilbury below the level crossing used the bridge, and that was a scenario that they looked at. Yeah, we had to look at that scenario because, you know, the likelihood is, as you said, because of the delays currently at the level crossing, that, you know, people, if it's a freer route, then people are likely to use it.
Thanks, Julian. But I guess my question is, is the design of that? I know this is an outline plan, but is it the intention to make that road large enough to carry the kind of volume of traffic, if it were to ever happen, that it's going to have to carry?
Yeah, it would be designed such that it would have to carry that level of traffic and the appropriate vehicles that would need to use it, which is potentially HGVs that will be that currently use a Thames Park industrial site. So yes, it would have to be of a significant nature.
Yeah, thanks, Julian, because that would also include all the tipper trucks that go down to the St Margaret's Road at the moment, and to the pits, or the whatever they call them these days, but they're basically to the pits. Thank you, Julian. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, can I just add to that? The tippers don't go through now. The site that was the Walsh's site that was down at the lower end of Tilbury is now being closed. So you do get occasionally when Stratera Energy close Station Road because they're doing works for the generation site. The Brocks sometimes come out via East Tilbury, but they shouldn't be. Their normal route from the Station Road is out via Fort Road.
Councillor Lydiard.
Thanks, Chair. I know that outline planning applications have reserved matters. How important is it that the bridge, the school, the pipeline, the electric pylons and stuff like that had to be specifically drawn up so as to, you know, not cause problems later on?
I guess it's partly a matter of judgment, but there should be enough there to make it clear what would be lawfully permitted were permission to be granted. There is a point of difference between the applicant and officers on what should and shouldn't be included in access in terms of level of detail, and that may well have come through in the report in terms of officers perhaps wanting to see more details on the bridge to understand how deliverable it is, what its scale and appearance is like, but then that matters of scale and appearance are reserved. But what you would normally do is make very clear minimum and maximum parameters so that you are very clear about what is being approved, and that sets the framework for then the details that then get filled in at reserved matters stage. I hope that helps. But
Any other questions from members? Councillor Lydiard.
We talk about this site being sort of green belt, and you mentioned soil quality 3A and 3B. Is that fairly high quality in terms of agricultural land?
I might just defer to Chris to answer this question, which is also referred to in the addendum as well.
Thank you, Chair. It's contained within the report and also mentioned in the addendum. And it's based on the land classification map that is managed by the Natural England. And looking at that map, this area, in terms of its shading, identifies the land to be very good for agricultural purposes.
Thank you. Any more questions from members? I've got two before we move on, if I may. Firstly, the question was raised whether any of our reasons for refusal could reasonably be reshaped as conditions. What are your views on that?
I'll begin and see if Chris would also like to offer any comment on this. I think that if we didn't feel they were robust enough to be reasons for refusal that could be defended under inquiry, we wouldn't have put them in the first place. And that's why you'll see some matters within the report are discussed. You may see that statutory or non-statutory consultees may have concerns about a certain topic, for instance, urban design, but we have no urban design reason for refusal. Concerns can sometimes shape conditions, though, so if members were minded to make a different resolution to the recommendation that officers have made, or indeed the planning inspectorate were to reach a different conclusion to officers, then of course we would need to look at what the appropriate conditions would be, and thematically those will often be drawn down from the areas of greatest concern, which are currently reasons for refusal. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to add there's obviously a number of reasons here that are insufficient information reasons. I mean, generally our approach as planners and the guidance is that we look to condition and approve developments if at all possible. Obviously in this instance, and the lack of information on various aspects that have led to those reasons of refusal mean we're not in that position. And also we're in a position where our decision-making powers have been taken away because of this appeal against non-determination. So we've had to bring this report as soon as we can during the life of this appeal, which the start letter came in last month and is to a strict timetable. We as an authority have to meet that timetable and provide that information. So obviously we're having to take this report to this committee based on where we are. Ideally, if there wasn't an appeal, we would have probably sought to negotiate with the applicants and the agents more to try and not have quite so many reasons of refusal. But we're in a position where we're in an appeal. It's down to an inspector to decide on what new information comes in. That's been taken away from us in terms of the appeal process. So it's down to the inspector whether he would, if the appellant and the agents want to provide any new information. That's for the inspector, not for us. So at the moment, we're obviously taking this report to you at this moment in time with these reasons of refusal, and that is the position we're in.
So to a degree, our hand has been forced. Is that what you're saying?
To some extent, yes, because of where we are, we need to bring this to committee to see what with our recommendation, to see if members would agree with what we would have done if this would have been a live planning application based on the information we have before us.
Thank you. And my second question, the speaker for the applicant referred to factual inaccuracies, which in my view is a quite serious accusation to make. I was just interested to know your thoughts on that comment.
We were only aware of that being raised verbally in this speaker session. I mean, the speaker that spoke wasn't the applicant. We've obviously got the speaker statements in front of us from Mr. Cole, who we thought was going to speak. The agent spoke instead and raised these points. That hasn't been raised with us at all until we heard that. We don't know what those inaccuracies, those alleged inaccuracies are. Obviously, post this committee, that I'm sure they'll come to fruition, but we don't have that information to say what those inaccuracies are, to comment.
So on the information you have, you are confident that you could go to the appeal with the information, with a decision?
Yes, based on the information in this report, which I would add as well, was legally reviewed as well before it came to planning committee. So it has been inspected legally as well as from ourselves as planners.
Thank you. Now, before we move on to the debate, I know that Ash wanted to just make a quick point, I think, for members' benefit.
Thank you, Chair. So through you, it was just a point of clarification, really, for members of the committee. There's reference to the site being allocated. What's being discussed there, or referenced, is what's in a Regulation 18 consultation, so that carries limited weight at decision making. So it's not allocated in the sense of it's an adopted local plan. So just when you're applying that weight in your decision, just bear that in mind.
Thanks, Ash. So I'd like to move on to debate. So who would like to cast the first stone? Who'd like to kick us off? Councillor Kelly.
Actually, if you don't mind, just one quick question, if that's okay, just before we head there.
So we're back in questions.
Sorry,
on you go,
just
Councillor Kelly.
last one. So obviously, to the planners, seismic change in British politics this week, and yeah, we picked up some comments there from the developers. Listening to the Chancellor a few days ago, huge sort of really aggressive in sort of grabbing the planning rulebook and looking at shaking it up to go for growth. And it's not something we've heard in a long time. And with a new government, we've heard lots more planning officers, which I think we can all agree is going to be a great thing. But could we be in a unique scenario where the rules change before we get to the appeal in October? I mean, it's 3-4 months away. And we know the government wants 2.5% growth. The only way they're going to get that is by really sort of going for, I think, potentially the Lower Thames Crossing. One thing about a new government coming in, and certainly a powerful government, sort of a large majority, is they can flex their muscles a bit and be aggressive. And I think, again, looking at the Lower Thames Crossing, whether we like it or don't like it, again, some would argue if you want to go for growth and get the country moving, that they might give that the green light. We don't know. There's a lot of guesswork there, but I would guess they're probably going to maybe give that the green light. So to officers, is it a potential scenario that the MPPF or the rules change before we get to appeal in October? Nothing you can do about it now because we can only deal with the information we have now. But it was really, can the rules change potentially before we get to appeal? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So potentially, policy can change. Ultimately, committee have got to make a decision in terms of what's in front of them now. If national policy does change or guidance, then we'll have to sort of take that into account at the time, and the inspector will have to make a decision on it, and we'll engage in that process. But that's always a risk anyway. So we can't second guess what might happen, and that would be my advice to committee. All you can do now for all these applications is make your decision based on what's in front of you, and the officers have done a thorough assessment in terms of the current status of policy, locally and nationally.
Thank you. Councillor Sisterson.
Sorry, it's just a question, and it's because I'm sort of new to it. Is it the case that when it goes to the public inquiry, they will decide whether to approve or not to approve this application? So it won't come back to us at any stage?
Essentially, the process is each side makes their representations and can call witnesses. So each side will have legal counsel as well, and Thurrock Council has already engaged a KC to advise us, who's also reviewed the draft report as well. So because it's an inquiry that's held in public, people can make representations. Anyone who's providing evidence will be cross-examined, so that might be myself, it might be Chris, but it's more likely to be a planning consultant who will be appointed as an expert witness to look independently at the application and to provide evidence to the planning inspector as to whether they think that the recommendations are sound. And then effectively, yes, the planning inspector will make a final decision.
So just to be clear, Elizabeth, then rather than come back here, you're saying it would be decided by the planning inspector?
Yes, and we're already at that point. So you will be providing a resolution tonight, whether to refuse planning approval or grant it, and if it were a refusal in line with our recommendations, those would effectively be putative reasons for refusal. So if you were deciding it, that's how you would decide it. But because it's going to the planning inspector to decide, you're saying, this is our resolution, these are our views, this is our evidence, please take it into consideration.
Thank you. So members, do you feel in a position to discuss what to do? Do you require any sort of further explanation in terms of what we're doing because I appreciate you're being told, in effect, this isn't real. In effect, we are being asked to make a decision as if this were coming in front of us as an application for agreement or refusal. It won't then happen or not happen. It will go to the inspector, but it's still important that we make our decision based on the information we've heard. Does that make sense? Okay, so would anybody like to start the discussion? Thank you, Steve.
Here we go again. You're going to be bored with me tonight. Thanks, Chair. I guess there's a lot of things that you would understand that I'd be dead against, since my whole role is about representing the Greenbelt. So the first point I'd make is, despite what was said earlier, this site is not in a locally adopted plan. Therefore, it's Greenbelt. End of story. So there was a kind of a misdirection almost earlier, in my opinion. So it's not in the local plan, therefore it is Greenbelt. It's Greenbelt land. The rules around the Greenbelt, as you well know, are fairly rigid about what should and shouldn't take place. And whilst, as Councillor Kelly mentioned, yes, we've had a change of administration and they've talked about building, but at the same time, they've also talked about defending the Greenbelt. So there's two things there that could go, one for, one against, or both for, both against, whatever. I don't know how the hell that's going to come out, but that's what's been promised. So that would be my second point. There is no indication of any kind of special circumstances around this site. So it could be anywhere. It's not that close to DP World. Canvey Island is closer, so have they looked at a site there? Have they looked at a site at Basildon? Have they looked at a site in Brentwood? Have they looked at any other sites in Thurrock? And I was kind of not sure that I got the answer that I asked for, in that it's their preferred site. Well, okay, it might be your preferred site if you owned it, but if you haven't looked at any others, well, it would be, wouldn't it? So I don't see that as much of an argument. But when I look at that area, and as that was pointed out earlier, the amount of development that's gone on over the last, in my lifetime, in East Tilbury, what was a little rural village, or two little rural villages, the Barter site was built there, which kind of almost stood on its own, although it's adjacent the other side of the line to Linford. This, without a doubt, as far as I can see, is urban sprawl, because it links the two up perfectly, and it takes away good quality agricultural land. So I cannot see, I think the officer's report has been very well constructed. I was very pleased to read it, and all the points they've made about why it shouldn't happen, and the fact that it's in the Greenbelt, is the key to why it shouldn't happen. So the suggestion that if we had to make this decision now, I don't think there's any doubt, certainly not in my mind, but I can't imagine in many other people's, that the answer would be no. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Byrne.
Yes, tonight is an our decision. We've got to base it on what we hear tonight, and the odds are very high that when a local plan comes in, this actual parcel is going to be top of the list. But we are here tonight, and we've had a great case put forward, so I can only say we can only vote no, because it's everything Greenbelt, everything's going against it. So we are here, what's happening now, we can't worry about whether the Labour government's going to change it or it's going to be in a local plan. So I think tonight, all we've got to think about is the rules and the laws tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? Councillor Lydiard.
Yes, I'm in agreement with Steve Taylor on this. Greenbelt is the most important issue here, and it's quality Greenbelt. You know, if we're going to build, we're going to need to build in sort of low quality agricultural or non-agricultural areas, and this isn't one of them. So in my view, we should go with the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sisterson.
Yeah, all I was going to say, I think my concern would be that they'll take this away, they'll try and satisfy all the insufficient information and everything, bring something more to the public inquiry. It'll involve us in a huge amount of expense, and they'll sort of weigh the balance in their favour by then. But not that I'm saying that should change your recommendation, because obviously we're dealing with what we've got now, but I just foresee that as a big expense that is unfortunate that we have to go through that process.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? So, if I can try and summarise what we've said so far. So, in terms of the factors in favour of approving this application, there is undoubtedly a need for housing across the borough. Whether that means housing here specifically is another question, but there is an overarching need for housing. The area, or at least part of the area, is under consideration as part of the local plan, which suggests that it, at some point in the future, will be considered appropriate for development, and that is worth taking into consideration now, I believe. And yes, it's a fair point that because a number of the reasons for refusal are based on lack of information, yes, there is a risk that between now and the inquiry, those gaps in the information become filled, and we might possibly find ourselves in a position where if we had all the information then, or now, that we might do then, that we might make a different decision. What I would suggest to you is that we can only base our decision on what we have now. In terms of reasons for refusing the application, as has been mentioned, it's building on Greenbelt. As we know, that means automatic harm, and it means there has to be a very good case made for benefits that will significantly outweigh that harm. And it's up to you to decide whether, from what you've heard, the benefits that have been put forward significantly outweigh the harm that will be done by building on Greenbelt. Secondly, I would note that there are a number of infrastructure concerns raised by Fraser and by Andrew, and also I think raised in the report. Thirdly, we have significant concerns raised by, who are they now, National Gas and by HSE, which I think would be, ought to be, they ought to be weighed up as significant in making your decision. And yeah, finally, as I say, yes, there are a number of reasons for refusal which are based on lack of information. We have to make our decision based on the information as we have it now. We can't second guess what might happen in the future, and that includes changes to policy on planning. So I would like to read the recommendation. Oh, let me check first that are we done with debate? You don't look like you fancy debating much longer, Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is slightly more difficult because effectively we're being asked to sort of look into the future a little bit, look at different scenarios. There's a lot of guesswork, so I absolutely understand why there's no appetite for this evening. I think for me, the standout one I'm slightly nervous about is access. Everything else I think potentially could be workable, but again, we don't have the information with us. Yes, the green belt is important, but so is the, our housing supply and responding positively to that. So for me, I think if I had a bit more information on the access, that I could probably come to some form of conclusion. And I think option one, I think it was, with the lower Thames crossing, which I think is what we might be looking at in the future, that may be workable, but again, it's probably not something we could probably approve here this evening. I'm tempted to abstain because ultimately I don't know effectively what the future's holding, but I'll probably stick with what the committee's going to do, and yeah, we'll see what the future holds. But again, it will be really interesting to see what, if anything, changes over the next 4 to 5 months. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. And yes, it's absolutely right to wonder how things might change between now and then. Okay, so let me read the recommendation out to you. So the recommendation is that members agree to, now do stick with me on this one, I had to read it twice. that members agree to the recommendation that if it weren't for the appeal against non-determination, the application would have been refused planning permission. We're there so far. The proposal would have significant strategic implications for the borough, as the site would represent development in the Greenbelt and would therefore be a departure from the adopted Thurrock LDF core strategy and policies for the management of development, and would normally be subject to referral to the Secretary of State. However, the applicant has appealed against non-determination of the planning application. This application is now subject to an appeal, and therefore the decision taken by the Planning Committee won't form an actual approval or refusal, but will inform the Council's case for the appeal. So, sorry it's a long one, that's the recommendation. May I ask for a proposer for acceptance of that recommendation? Councillor Lydiard, thank you. Anybody second? Councillor Byrne. So those in favour of the recommendation, if you can still remember it. Sorry, I forgot to put my own hand up. That's a little bit pathetic, isn't it? Do you have what you need, Jenny? Thank you. Any votes against the recommendation? And any abstentions? Councillor Shinnick? Okay. Thank you very much. So the recommendation is accepted. Thank you very much. We are a little bit past 7 o'clock. I'm going to suggest a natural break for about 5 minutes. I'd take this one because I tend to forget, and heaven knows when I'll remember again. May I ask Alan Ward to present the report, please? And Alan, I know we've had some problems with our, so if you can sort of jam yourself close to the microphone, that would be great.
Thank you, Chair. Just to check, can everybody hear me okay? Good stuff. The site constitutes King's Farm, also known as Thurrock Airfield. It's roughly rectangular in shape, 31 hectares in area with frontages on Parker's Farm Road and on the A128. There's a tarmac airstrip that runs centrally through the site, east-west. There's a secondary grass airstrip that runs immediately to the south of that tarmac airstrip. And there's also another grass airstrip that runs north to south. There's a house at the western end of the site, which is a large residential property. Immediately to the south of that are some buildings associated with the airfield, and then you can see the open storage of small aircraft. The site's located entirely within the Greenbelt. You can see the airfield here running through the middle. There's the Mardyke River that runs immediately to the north of the site, and then to the south of the site, within the site, is a public right-of-way that you can just make out there. The application is outlined in nature for up to 750 dwellings, also proposes a medical centre, shops, and other uses within the light industry, general industry, and warehousing categories. The only matter fixed for determination at this stage is the access. That would be an access onto the A128 with the existing access onto Parker's Farm Road being closed off, and the only access remaining on that side would be for the residential property. There would also be a pedestrian and cycle access onto Parker's Farm Road. Secondary emergency access is also shown slightly further towards the south on the A128. That would obviously only be for times when you couldn't use the main new access, which would be facilitated by the roundabout. But please note the access that you're seeing in front of you at the moment only shows up to 669 dwellings, whereas the application is for up to 750. Because the layout's not fixed at this time, you don't necessarily need to show 750, but if you had more homes on there, that may result in quite a different layout to what you're seeing at the moment. The indicative layout shows houses and flats across a mix of sizes up to 3 stories in height. There would be 35% affordable housing in line with policy, which would be dispersed through the site. The applicants have shown some indicative CGIs in lieu of any actual formal elevations of housing, which you can see here. And then we've got some existing photos of the site as it stands now. So this is looking across the hard runway that's there at the moment. This is the north boundary looking east, the north boundary looking west, east boundary from the north, so you can see the existing situation, which is a relatively open field. Then we go on, you can see the planes there on the sort of right-hand side of the photo. There's the existing hangar that's outside the residential curtilage, so that would form part of the application site. This is a view onto the site from the public right-of-way. At this point, it's probably worth reiterating the addendum item, which includes additional information that's recently been put in by the applicant. They are requesting a deferral of the application to resolve outstanding highways issues. They have said they will submit an appeal if this application is refused, and that they're continuing dialogue on highways matters. Also in the addendum, you've got the latest response from our highways consultees. You can see there's still outstanding matters which have not been resolved. The applicants are asking for another 2 months on this, but they've already had since May, and the application was deferred from 2 previous committees due to also outstanding highways matters. Those matters still haven't been resolved after an extended period of time. So we are proceeding here tonight to the committee for determination tonight. So the main issues are the application constitutes inappropriate development within the Greenbelt. It's by definition harmful, where substantial weight should be given to that harm. We accept the proposal does have the benefit of new housing. That is a significant benefit that you weigh in the planning balance. But that benefit alone, along with the other benefits listed by the applicant, they're not considered singularly or cumulatively to amount to very special circumstances to justify this development in the Greenbelt. There's also harm to the landscape character of the fen. The site's in an isolated position. It's reliant on the private transport, and the proposed solutions to improve connectivity, they're not supported by officers. We have a holding objection from National Highways at this time. They require more information to ensure there's no significant impact upon the strategic road network. It should be noted that any solution to ensure there's no impact on the strategic road network would also impact the local road network, and more information would be required for the highway officer to also assess that impact as well. Other issues exist regarding insufficient information to assess the impact on the town centre uses, the employment offer, the lack of on-site recreational space, and the impact on the Thames Special Protection Area. Also got issues on noise with the future living conditions for new residents. So on that basis, the recommendation is to refuse planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. Before we move on to any questions for Alan, I would like to invite a couple of statements. So we have a statement of support from Kevin Lee and a statement of objection from Councillor Barry Johnson. So I would invite both of you to come down and find yourselves a microphone. So I will ask Councillor Johnson to make his statement first, and then Mr. Lee will come on to yourself. Councillor Johnson, well, I'm sure you're familiar with our microphones. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly won't be taking the full 3 minutes. I'll just make it clear I'm in full agreement with the officer's report as a refusal for this application. Apart from the site being firmly within the Metropolitan Greenbelt, which remains precious, it's quite clear that the village of Bolton and the site itself simply cannot accommodate an application of this size. Whilst I like the idea of a roundabout, the A128, to slow things down, I cannot for the life of me see where one could be safely built, and certainly not where this application suggests. I also do not see how the building of flats or buildings of 3-storey heights could possibly be in keeping with the area. This is fenland, and as such is flat, so any building of this type would have a massive impact on the openness of this Greenbelt site. I am aware of many letters of objection, most of which have found their way into my inbox. But at 4.2 in the report, those objections are clearly listed, and I have to agree with all of them. However, some of them stand out. In particular, the proposal is nearly twice the size of the existing Bolton village, which would not only change the whole character of the area, it would see a vastly rural area turned into another village, which, if allowed, would encourage urban sprawl. In completion, Chair, it is quite clear from the report and residents' concerns that neither the A128 or Bolton Village can cope with an application of this size, and I would urge the committee to seek approval of sites already included in the outline local plan, and I totally agree with Officer's recommendation to refuse.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Lee, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, members. We provided a statement in advance, and given the 3 minutes, there is insufficient time to read that word for word, and as intelligent councillors, you don't need me to read what's there in front of you, so I'm going to pick the important points that come from this. Having listened to the previous application, there are some points that we want to draw to your attention. Mr. Fletcher made the point about the state of your Regulation 18 local plan. In other words, at the moment you have no plan in place, you are massively out of date, and you are hugely behind on providing housing. He said you should give it little weight in relation to the other scheme, and that's probably a fair assessment. Your plan hasn't yet been through scrutiny, and frankly the plan in itself doesn't provide enough housing for you to match up to what this new government says is going to be 300,000 houses per year. It may be that orthodox planning encourages people to think of Greenbelt as being immutable, but that is going to change. Probably should have changed a long time ago, and then we wouldn't be in the housing crisis that we're in. What's important is your own authority accept that at a strategic level, your Greenbelt needs to be adjusted quite substantially. You cannot protect every blade of grass, no matter what you might think. And therefore, when Mr. Taylor was speaking about the state of Greenbelt and where this government is, he actually misunderstands and misrepresents the position. What happened last week was a seismic change, not just in the government coming in, but it's made it clear, and you may or may not be aware, that it's consulting on the MPPF right now. It intends before the summer recess to get the MPPF changed to allow development of what it calls grey belt and other parts of the green belt. That would include a site like this. This is not farmland. It is an active airfield. That's coming out because this government wants, by the time of the September budget, to make sure that it is going somewhere with its housing and the money it needs for it. Therefore, although your officer takes the orthodox view that you should turn this down because it doesn't tick the boxes, we say you've got two choices. One, you could defer today to go away and try and sort out what's left of the issues, bearing in mind you need housing, and either it will be imposed on you by PINS, the Planning Inspectorate, or you can agree sites. What you can do by deferring is deal with the one technical matter left. The highway matter simply concerns the flowback of traffic north of the Treacle Mine roundabout. There is a meeting on the 15th of July. We expect that to be resolved. What that actually means is details of noise, etc., the properties doesn't matter. What it means is that you can have a think about whether you want to help this government bring the housing it's promised and people got voted to provide, or whether you want to keep flying in the face of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Before we move on to questioning the officers, I'm sure you would love to ask some factual questions. May I ask that you stick to factual questions, and we will deal with any other matters during the debate. Any members wish to ask any factual questions of Mr. Lee or Councillor Johnson? Okay, thank you. So let's move on to the presentation, Alan's presentation. Do any of you have any questions that you wish to put to Alan? Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just trying to clarify something in my own ear. And we've just heard from the speaker that this is an active airfield. Does that actually sort of offer any sort of weight within this, within this application? Because it's obviously, I mean, I would consider that to be as an active airfield. It's a significant site, something that's not easily replicated anywhere else. Without obviously its own issues. Is this, maybe something that is an area that needs to be protected in its own right?
So I think the first question about the site itself and being a substantial site, it's a large site, but part of the reason why we had so many photos of the site was to show how open and undeveloped it is at this time. So there are some buildings in the southwestern corner of the site that are used in relation to the airfield. Now, that plus the hard runway or the hard airstrip, whichever you wish to call it, you could construe that as previously developed land. And in Greenbelt terms, you can develop previously developed land, but the caveat is that there's no greater impact on the openness. And obviously, if you were to change the few buildings that are on the site with 750 homes, commercial uses, shops, and all the other paraphernalia, you would have a fundamentally different site with a significant impact on that openness. In terms of the second part of your question about, were you saying essentially to protect the site in itself?
But yes, I mean, it's really, an airfield is a strategic part of national infrastructure, whether it be large or small. Maybe some would even say, like, moving into the times that are coming ahead, we just don't know. Is an airfield of this nature something that we should actually look to maybe keep out of development because it is actually an established airfield? I'm just kind of wondering if that is a factor or could be a factor with regards a potential refusal with this. Do you see what I mean? I don't think I'm making much sense of myself, but because it's an established airfield, should we be taking it away from the national infrastructure?
Yeah. So in policy terms, the NPPF talks about having consideration for airstrips, existing airstrips, when you're making new policies, but that's more part of the plan making process. On immediate applications like this, we've got to look at the merits of the application, whether there's a lot of jobs or does it serve a greater need. And in this instance, we don't think there's a reason for refusal on those grounds.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Shinnick.
Yeah, regarding the A128, I don't know if you know, which is a rather busy road, they're proposing to put a roundabout in. So is this been secured that will go in that roundabout?
The roundabout would only go in if the application was permitted. And the design of that roundabout, I mean, part of the application site would be incorporated into highway land to essentially calm the traffic that goes north-south along that road. But it would only come forward if the development came forward.
Steve Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Alan. having read the report, I thought I'd read it in detail, but it brings to mind a question based on your presentation, that it appears that there's only proposed a single access to the site. Am I right to assume that?
There's one formal access, which is the roundabout junction, and they're proposing an emergency access slightly further to the south onto the A128.
Okay, so there is a second as an emergency, but only as an emergency. So everything would go in and out on that roundabout in normal circumstances.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Steve. Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, picking up on those last two questions, if you go around about, I'm guessing, 2-3 miles up the road, Brentwood have recently, off the A128, approved a garden village of around about, I think it was 3,700 to 4,000 homes. Access is off the A128 via 2 roundabouts. So obviously, if the developer goes to appeal, one of their arguments is clearly going to be, well, up the road in Brentwood, they've approved a garden village off the A128, 2 roundabouts. Nearly 4,000 homes. This is, was it around about 800 homes? So you're confident that you could sort of argue that point? And with your reason for refusal on access, is it down to lack of information at this stage? Because ultimately, I think it would be very difficult to argue if just up the road, you know, you're looking at a 4,000 home development. And in addition, when you look at national highways, they're saying they're concerned about the Treacle Mine roundabout and the Stiffer Clays junction. But how have Brentwood got away with that if they're approving a scheme of 4,000 homes? I appreciate it is closer to the A12. So really a highways question. Personally, I think very difficult to argue that roundabout is going to be an issue, other than lack of detail on highways' reason for refusal. Thank you.
So I think you're saying the roundabout onto the A128, which is being proposed, it would be hard to resist. Is that
on the basis you've got a 4,000 home village that has just been approved 3 miles up the road on the A128, accessing the garden village, and this is for less than 1,000. That was for 4,000. I think I've got that right. I think it was 2 roundabouts. Thank you.
It's that roundabout in itself. That's not the issue with regards to access to the site. It's a wider issue of sustainability because there's no footpath to this site. There's no cycle lane to this site. You cannot walk to and from it to get to all the main services and facilities. The applicants proposed 2 options on Parkers Lane Road, which are quite fundamental. One's called a quiet lane concept, where essentially you would stop traffic being able to go all the way along that road. You'd stop it in the middle, and you'd prioritise pedestrians and cyclists over that to get a link up to Balvin. But even if you got to Balvin, you're still lacking in terms of facilities, amenities, and public transport. So it's not so much the roundabout on the A128, it's more the fact that you'll be reliant on the car to go to and from this site.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sisterson.
So just
sorry, my apologies.
Yeah, I think Councillor Kelly asked a question about the Treacle Mine roundabout. So in the Dunton Village, if you look at national highways, which is there was a panoramics model that assessed not only our network but also the 127 and the junction 28, 29. In this, they looked at this site and considered that in view of the Thames Enterprise Park application and the potential impacts of the Thames Enterprise Park along the A13 at various corridors, they wanted the North Stifford interchange actually checked in terms of its impact. And obviously that has a significant impact on the Treacle Mine roundabout. And at the moment, National Highways have not approved the modelling for the North Stifford interchange, and are presently suggesting maybe some changes which would need further review from our point of view in terms of its impact on a Treacle Mine roundabout, because obviously we would not support an application that potentially makes improvements on one part of the network but then causes problems on another part of the network.
Thanks, Julian. Councillor Sisterson.
I just wanted to confirm, is there any public transport at all along the 128 there that would join this development up with anywhere else?
Thank you, Chair. There is currently a service that runs towards Brentwood. It's not a frequent bus service. The applicant is suggesting that potentially that service may be potentially enhanced, but we haven't actually seen a lot more in detail in regards to that. And obviously, to make this sustainable, I mean, it would obviously need to operate pretty frequently and every day of the week.
Thank you. Councillor Byrne.
Yeah, I can't remember who said it, but there was the threat of if we don't agree with this, there's going to be a guaranteed appeal. Does that carry any weight? We just ignore that because I can't see if they're threatening us with an appeal, they obviously don't think their application is very good.
Every applicant has the right to an appeal.
Thank you, Alan. Any more questions? Okay, so I'd like to move on to the debate. It seems the key points here are, as with the previous application, we're looking at development in Greenbelt. We're aware of what that means in terms of how it's regarded automatically as harm and as inappropriate development, and we are required, if we were to approve the development, to consider the benefits as significantly outweighing the harm. These are the rules as they apply now. We're not being asked to take a flyer on what might happen in 6 months' time. We are here to balance the needs and the requirements of the people of Thurrock against what the law lays down and what policies lay down. Current laws, current policies. And my suggestion is that we continue to look at the situation as it is now, which is all we can do. So would anybody like to kick off the debate? Councillor Lydiard.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, just in summary, that it is quite a remote site. It's in Greenbelt, which is very important. Transport is a major problem there, and access onto the 128 isn't fantastic. So I shall be going with the officer's recommendations.
Councillor Manny.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the Speaker said we can't protect every blade of grass in the Greenbelt, but I have to say, if applications are put before us like this, where it is clearly inappropriate development, and the benefits are not significantly outweighing the harm, then we absolutely should be.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. So for me, I think the actual application in front of us is very dense for a remote location. Although I would say the site itself could have potential in the future. Reason 2 for refusal suggests that the site is a remote and unsustainable location. I'm not entirely sure I always agree with that. I agree with it on the basis of density, but rural areas also need to take their fair share as well of homes. Now, a few years ago, it's probably about 10 years ago now, we did approve a site in Little Mulgraves Farm, which came with a hospice off of, I think it was Lower Dunton Road. And that site's obviously, that's been a success. I think it was built out by Redrow, sort of 4 to 5 bedroom homes. And that was around about 80 homes. And as I said, the hospice is up and running now. I think that was in the Greenbelt. And there are patients in that facility now receiving world-class healthcare. So there can be sometimes benefits of approving sites like this. The size of this particular site, you could probably, if you look at the Little Mulgraves Farm site, you could probably get around about, I think something in the tune of around about 200 homes would be reasonable if we're going to look at a remote location like this. And again, not Red Rover essentially, but something like that. And all of a sudden, then I would start looking at this as a potential serious site. But given its current density, I must admit, it's probably too difficult. On the basis that I don't agree with reason 2, again, I'll have a little think. I might abstain because I think the site, as I said, might have potential in the future. But I'll given the density, it's not something I'll certainly want to approve it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Paulson?
Thanks, Chair. Off the back of Councillor Kelly's point, I just want to say that given the size of the site of 750 approximately residential dwellings, if we were to take into account the volume of traffic of an average 2-car household, that's 1,500 vehicles, looking at one access point for 1,500 vehicles onto a pretty substantial road as it already is, I think that would almost definitely put strain on the existing area, but on the new estate itself, and I think that should be borne in mind as well.
Thank you. Steve Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. In support of the last speaker's point, I'd also add, and I'm sure that Julian and Matthew would agree with me, the 128 is one of the most dangerous roads in Thurrock. There's been endless deaths on it, and although there's an improvement since the speed restrictions are on it, there's still accidents on it, as doubtless you guys are aware, very regularly. So I completely agree. And the 1,500 movements, I might add, is in one direction. So if they come back the same day, that's now 3,000. And if you've got people popping out to drop children at school because there's no schools nearby that you can walk to, because there's no footpaths, because there's no cycle tracks, so the whole site is inappropriate in total. But just to go back over a couple of other points, historically, that site was part of the riverbed of the Mardyke. And that riverbed went roughly from the back end of Orsett as far as Worley. So that's what the site was. It then became fenland once it was drained, and the fenland was the giveaways in the title, Balvan. It was a fen for bulls to graze on, and you had to have permission to graze them, but it was open land. It subsequently became government land. It then became farmed by what was the Whitmore family, and as time went on, the site was broken up and sold. Originally, it was livestock. It was then arable, and then probably, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago, it became the airfield. So that's the sort of backdrop to it. So if it looks like farmland, it was. That's what it's always been. But there's a sort of far more fundamental point in my mind, and some of you have heard me say this before, but it's absolutely true. The original purpose of the Greenbelt was to be a 25-mile to 35-mile wide band surrounding metropolitan London. If you look at where that band is now, if you go around to places like Surrey and Sussex, you'll find substantially some of it is still exactly as it was. So the blade of grass comment, as far as I'm concerned, other people seem to do a better job of it. We've got the narrowest part of that green belt left, and roughly in line with where that point is, if you went from Langdon Hills to Ockenden or Upminster, take your pick, it's about 4.5 miles. That's all. And this is smack bang in the middle of it. So at the moment, you've got two very old villages that have been there for, since, well, the churches testified to their age, but for the last 1,000 years, roughly. And now what you're going to do is try and put this huge site on one field, in the middle of them, in the middle of the narrowest part of the Greenbelt. And I'm sorry, but I can't see any government minister, given what the purpose of the Greenbelt is. I accept that some of it's got to be given up, but this has got to be the worst possible place in the whole of the metropolitan Greenbelt. So, needless to say, ignoring the transport links that don't exist, the whole point of Greenbelt was to stop that merging together. So, at this rate, long before I die, Greater London will extend all the way to Southend. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. Councillor Byrne.
Yeah, all these people trying to sell us a plan. I can't believe somebody actually disrespects every blade of grass when our training teaches us to respect every blade of grass. So I don't know, that is like offended a lot of people, I'm sure. That it's, I don't know why, how that guy's even done it. But yeah, so I'm going to be voting against this for Greenbelt reasons.
Councillor Arnold?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I will be going along with the officer's recommendation. I mean, I completely agree with virtually everything that's been said tonight, and I think the previous comment about, you know, the fenland, etc., was very well put. The only thing I can't really agree with, actually, is from my colleague to my right here. I don't think it's even actually suitable land to put 200 houses. It's actually completely the wrong area, and if you are going to build properties, and I know it's coming down the line, we're all very well aware of this, but a sensitivity needs to be gained. You know, they need to be linked onto maybe additional villages, and I know that's sensitive as well, but just extending village boundaries is the way to go. I don't think a substantial development like this in the middle of fenland is appropriate for any number of houses. So I will go along with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else, anything to add? Okay, so if I may summarise, I think we have a number of reasons for, well, actually, I think before I go into the fors and againsts, I think whatever you feel about the tone of the statement, I would urge you to put that to one side, and as I'm sure you will, to consider this on the merits of the actual application. Not easy necessarily, but I think let's look at it on its merits. And in terms of its merits, yes, we are well aware that we are short of housing, drastically short of housing. It's been something, I think it's one of the few things that both Conservative and Labour members can agree on. It's also, I think, pretty obvious that we're likely to come under even more pressure to build, even beyond the pressure we put upon ourselves, because we know we need to house those in the borough who don't yet have the opportunity to actually live in their own borough when they grow up. It's also clear, and should be taken as a point in favour, that we have a ridiculous amount of greenbelt, if you pardon my calling it ridiculous. About 2/3 of our borough is greenbelt, and I think it is acknowledged that at some point we are going to have to build on some of that greenbelt to deliver the housing that this borough needs. All these fours I would describe as quite general points. You could apply them to any site across the borough, and that need doesn't go away. Those requirements don't go away. Regarding this particular site, what's been said is that we're looking at a particularly isolated site, and a site where the adjacent road is one of the more dangerous roads in the borough. We're looking at access issues. We're also looking at more general green belt issues, that this is a particular bit of the jigsaw that if you take it out, it narrows the green belt to an unacceptable level. Those seem to be the main reasons that have been put against considering, against approving this application. It's also been mentioned by a couple of you that the size of the development would dwarf the adjacent village of Bulven, and that completely changes the nature of the area. So we have fors, we have againsts. I'd like to read you the recommendation that's been put to us by the officers, and I'll ask you to consider whether you would approve or reject that proposal. Unlike the last one, it's a very short one. The recommendation is to refuse planning permission. Do I have a proposer for that recommendation? Councillor Shinnick. Seconded, Councillor Arnold. All those in favour of refusing planning permission for this application? All those against? And abstentions? Thank you. Have you got the one extent? Thank you very much. So the application has been refused. One quick point that I want to make, and I didn't want to make it before the committee considered or gave its answer. We've had a couple of instances tonight in our applications of suggestions, both implicated and straight out, that our planning officers, for some reason, don't know their job, or are misleading us, or for some reason don't seem to have the ability to give us a decent proposal. We in the committee are very used, I've been on this committee before for a number of years, we're very used to disagreeing with our colleagues, the officers. And very often that is because whilst they may be correct in their application of planning policy and law, we have a different view from the position of our jobs as representatives of the local people. However, whether we agree or disagree with our planning officers, it is always done from a point of view of respect. And I would like to see the same respect shown when making application statements to this committee. I trust if I see either of you gentlemen again, which I hope I do, that you will bear that in mind. Do I make myself clear? Thank you. I'd like to propose that we suspend standing orders because we're going to go beyond our normal finishing time. And I'm desperately trying to find that particular page on my instructions. Give me 2 seconds. Oh, here we go. So I would like to move a motion without notice to suspend Council Procedure Rule 11.1 to allow the meeting to continue beyond its 2.5-hour time limit. Agreed? Thank you very much. I'll try not to keep it too long. I'll do my best. Thank you. Right. So we are now moving on to agenda item 9, Teviot Avenue. May I ask Jonathan Keane to present the report?
Thank you, Chair.
Just pass the good one down between you.
No. It's starting up. He's doing a start up. It'll turn off in a minute. Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. So this application is for the redevelopment of the existing site. At present, there are 36 one-bed units in a horseshoe shape, which are flats, and the proposal is to redevelop the site for 9 one-bed flats, 21 two-bed houses, 9 two-bed flats, 7 three-bed houses, and 2 four-bed houses. So the existing site is on the screen there at the moment. There's a central parking area, and the 3 blocks of flats are arranged in a horseshoe shape with amenity space to the back and shared amenity space to the front. In the top left of the site, there's one building which will remain as part of the scheme, and to the bottom left, there's another building that will remain as part of the scheme. And the application has been submitted by the Council's housing team and would be for units owned and operated by the Council's housing services. So this is a photo looking up north through Teviot Avenue, and the site is towards the rear of the picture, behind the trees. This is another picture looking north up Teviot Avenue. One of the blocks subject to the application is on the right,
and the block in the distance is also one of the blocks to be demolished. This is looking into the site at the north. The building on the left, the brick-built building, will remain, but the building on the right-hand side again is one of the blocks to be demolished. This is looking northeast from the southern part of the site, and again the building on the right is to remain, but the buildings in the middle of the picture are to be demolished. This is an image looking back through the site towards Teviot Avenue in the distance. The buildings on the right is one of the buildings that will be demolished. And that's looking east into the site from Teviot Avenue, and the buildings you can see on the left, centre and right are all to be demolished. And this is the final image, and that's looking south within the site, and those are two of the buildings that will be demolished as part of the scheme. So the applicant has advised that the buildings were built such a long time ago that it's not viable to refurbish them and repurpose them for high quality living to meet current standards. So the best solution is to redevelop the whole site to make better use of the land. So what you can see on the screen in front of you, Teviot Avenue running along the bottom of the picture. There will be houses along Teviot Avenue. There will be a block of flats here, which is sort of the middle of the northern part of the site. Flats here, and then houses along what would be the top and the back part of the site, and houses again along the middle of the site. And the access would be in and would come out, and all parking would be on street. So this is an image of what the site would look like. So again, the retained block where the cursor is, and another retained block to the top. So you've got the houses fronting Teviot Avenue, you've got the flatted block there, you've got the flatted block to the south, then you've got houses along this section, and houses along the back and the top of the site. This is an image of what it would look like as a proposed street scene. So you've got the retained block on the right-hand side, you've got the pairs of the semi-detached houses, and then the flatted block on the corner, and the retained building to the left-hand side. And on the back of the site, with the woodland behind, it's all semi-detached properties or detached property. And these are some of the housing types. So you've got 2-storey with accommodation in the roof, with or without a dormer. And this is what typically they'd look like in terms of materials, sort of brick finish, dark grey roof. So it's a modern interpretation of the semi-detached properties. The apartment blocks, sort of modern design with a variety of window forms, small balconies on the outside, and again a sort of materials palette of what could be expected. So the projecting balconies, the sort of recessed central elements, and the sort of parapet roof design. And this is a visualization looking southwest across the site. So from the top corner, so you've got the flatted block, sort of the highway sections, and the houses in the distance. So the overall layout is considered to be appropriate in terms of design and layout. The properties would provide a proper frontage onto Teviot Avenue, where at present the dwellings are in a horseshoe shape and don't have any regard for the main street scene. The amenity space would be provided for each of the houses. They'd have private amenity space to the rear, and the flatted accommodation would have shared amenity space behind. There are also children's play areas in this corner, top right of your picture, and a play area in this section of the site as well. So there'll be plenty of outdoor play area for children and young people. Car parking would take place on the streets. The flats would all have a single space for the new flatted accommodation, and there would be 41 spaces provided for the 30 houses. There would also be 4 visitor spaces provided, and there's a proposal for 2 car club spaces to be provided on Teviot Avenue, so this level of parking is considered to be acceptable. Given the distance from other properties, there wouldn't be any impact in terms of overlooking or overbearing for the development. As highlighted in the committee report, there has been a requirement for the NHS for contributions towards local healthcare provision, and the education team have also required provision towards education facilities in the area. The applicant, as we said, is the housing team. They have advised that there has been a cabinet resolution that they could provide those contributions to meet the NHS requirements and the education requirements, so those matters would be satisfied. So the
The application, as I said, makes provision for affordable housing units for the council, an uplift of 12 units across the site. The design's acceptable, level of parking is considered to be acceptable, and it would create a new high-quality living space on that part of Tevis Avenue. So approval is recommended.
Thanks, Jonathan. Before I give you the opportunity to ask questions, because it's never that simple, I would like to invite Jake Farmer to make a statement on behalf of the applicant. Jake, on that weird microphone thing, if you press the button on the right at the base, the top should light up. There you go. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, Councillors. My name is Jake Farmer. I'm an Associate Planner at DLP Planning, acting on behalf of Thurrock Council's Housing Development Team in support of this application. The applicants have been working proactively with the Council's planning officers, local residents and stakeholders in order to deliver a highly sustainable and energy efficient scheme set to increase affordable housing in the borough and make the best use of available land. The proposal seeks to replace the existing 3 residential blocks comprising 36 dwellings with the new development of 48 high quality, 100% affordable homes along with associated landscaping, parking and biodiversity enhancements. The primary aim of this development is to address the pressing need for affordable housing in Thurrock, and the proposed development would result in a net gain in affordable housing units, significantly contributing to the council's supply. By optimising the potential for delivery on this suitable brownfield site, we're taking the crucial step towards meeting the increasing need for demand of housing. The site is currently occupied by 3 blocks of flats each, all of which are outdated and energy inefficient, having been constructed in approximately the 1950s and only minimally refurbished in the 1980s. Following surveys have confirmed that the necessity of the redevelopment of the site. The new development will not only provide more dwellings, but also improve the quality and range of housing available for rent, making it the most effective use of land while supporting environmental sustainability and enhancing the affordability of homes in the borough. Proposed renewable energy measures such as the installation of air source heat pumps, PV panels, along with passive design solutions and building regulations compliant construction would provide residents with a gas-free, affordable and sustainable living accommodation. The proposed scheme includes significant improvements to the landscaping around the site, new tree planting along the eastern boundary and throughout the proposed streets would create a natural screen. And conscious of time, making the most sustainable solution for our affordable housing stock. How can we make the best use of land? And we believe this is an acceptable in terms of design and planning matters and should be approved. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. Before we move on to your questions for the officers, for Jonathan, do you have any factual questions for Jake? Councillor Lydiard.
Thanks for your presentation. Just interested to know how many additional people are we likely to be able to house?
So with the increase in the 3-bed and 2-bed units, it's slightly different. It will depend on who is accommodated into them, but I couldn't comment on the exact number. It would be a significant uplift, that's all I can say.
Any other questions for Jake? Jake, I have one question. The current flats, so the new ones will be 100% affordable housing. What are the current flats?
I believe they're a mix. They were formerly council housing as well.
So a mix of social housing and private?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, members, questions for Jonathan? Steve.
Thanks, Chair. When you know the original sort of plan you showed, I know it's not inside the red line, but was there a reason for not including the other two blocks, the ones at each end, since it appears that they're sort of similar build period and therefore probably likely to be in the same situation as the current ones?
What I understand from the application is it is only those 3 blocks that had the difficulties, and the others were brick built. So it might be that they've been adapted or of better quality than what's there that needs to be demolished.
No, that's fine. Thanks, Jonathan. It's just a question. Thanks.
Councillor Sisterson.
It's only a little question, and overall it seems a really good scheme. But will there be EV charging points? Was it?
There will be, yes.
Any further questions? No? Great. So let's move on to the debate. Who would like to start? We will be having a debate, won't we? Councillor Lydiard.
We should go straight to decision, really. But I was just going to say it looks absolutely marvellous, and I've been to the estate recently and did see the poor condition of these blocks. And yeah, the sooner we get the new houses, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Anybody else? Councillor Manny.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say that Councillor Sisterson and myself have been involved in this for quite some time. It's a good development and we desperately need it.
Thank you. Councillor Byrne.
Yeah, this is great. It's what we need. Develop something that's already there and improve it. I mean, that's before we look at taking away from the green belt or brownfield sites to put more into what we've got. I mean, that is no-brainer.
May I ask a... Oh, 2 seconds. Sorry, Councillor Manny and Councillor Sisterson, I just require to know a bit more about when you say you've been involved with the project for a while. Can you clarify, please?
Just to the presentations, that they do presentations for the residents. So we have been there on the presentation with residents who have asked us to attend.
Thank you, Chair. No, that's fine. It was just slightly concerned that you weren't open-minded, but yeah, okay, great.
Fair point. Just one question for members from me, really, is on-street parking, does that give anybody pause for concern? Councillor Lydiard.
Yeah, I've found that on estates owned by the council and obviously occupied by council residents, the number of cars per dwelling is probably about 30 or 40% less than in private estates. I don't know whether Julian might have anything to say about that.
Thank you. Julian?
Thank you, Chair. We've assessed the parking. We're happy with the extent of the parking to the fact that what they've also included is obviously car club, which gives that opportunity for people who haven't got a car to potentially use a car. So overall, we're happy with the application in terms of the parking side of it.
Okay, thank you. So it does sound rather like we are probably in a position to vote. So the recommendation from our officers, and I've managed to lose my piece of paper. Here we go. So the recommendation is to approve this application subject to conditions. And I think when Jonathan went through his report, I think you highlighted the conditions.
Yeah, we've got the conditions on the report itself, and subject to the agreement which the housing team had said what they had with the cabinet to provide the contributions towards education and the primary care trust.
Thanks, Jonathan. So that is the recommendation. May I have a proposer, please? Councillor Byrne? Sorry. And Councillor Lydiard to second? Yeah. Thank you. And all those in favour? No, this time I'm genuinely keeping my arm down.
You're putting your hand up.
I haven't voted, I know. Thank you. Those against? And abstentions? Sorry, folks, still slightly concerned about the impact on the street of the on-street parking. So. Right, so I think, sorry, Jenny, do you have all the information you need there? So the recommendation for approval is agreed. The application is approved. Which leads us on to item 10, last item on the report, which is Infinis Limited, and Chris Purvis to present the report. No, it's not Chris.
Lucy Mannion.
So, yes, I was thinking it's not Elizabeth either. It's Lisa, isn't it? Lucy. Oh, God, shoot me now. Apologies, Lucy. So, Lucy Mannion to read the report. Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for full planning permission for construction and operation of a photovoltaic solar array, battery energy storage system and other ancillary development. Okay, first of all, by way of update, there's only one, and it's regarding the informative 2, which is to do with the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981. We just had legal advice that a bit concerned that it wasn't clear that it's an offence to disturb nesting birds at any time of year, because it looks like it refers to just a certain period, but that will be updated should the application be approved. Okay, this is the site location plan. The application site comprises approximately 23 hectares of land in a broadly rectangular shaped plot. The land was previously part of the Aveley landfill, the use of which ceased in 2006-2007, and it's since been restored with grassland and other vegetation. The site is bordered to its south by Sandy Lane, which is the B1335, where access to the site is also gained. Kennington Park sits directly east of the site, with Pear Tree Farm to its west and Ingleborn Links Golf and Country Club, open fields and commercial properties to the north. The site is within Greenbelt. There are no statutory designations affecting the site, and the site does benefit from screening through trees and shrubbery to the northern, southern and western boundaries of the site. So this slide just shows the site in wider context. So Aveley is to the east, so here. The A13 is to the south, to there, and to the west is the A1306 and Wennington, and the M25 would be further to the east beyond Aveley. Okay, this is an aerial view of the site. So the site is here centrally within this photo. This is the proposed site layout. So here with the blue denoting the proposed solar arrays, and this is the ancillary equipment. So that's to the south of the site, and this in the top is a kind of a closer view of that associated equipment. This slide shows the indicative landscaping plan. Condition 7 secures the landscape and ecology management plan. This slide shows the elevations of the solar panels, and their maximum height is 3 metres. So this is a view from the site from Sandy Lane, and you can see how much vegetation there is, and that the solar array would not be visible outside the site at this point. This is the access to the site, so it's existing access from Sandy Lane. And this is with the access to the left of this photo. The solar farm would be to the left as well, behind the trees, so Sandy Lane facing east. So this is the site as it would be viewed from New Road, which is the A1306. And this is probably people are quite familiar with it by like Willow Farm, where they have a boot sale regularly. So the red line shows the extent of this is existing when it's built the solar farm. And the next slide shows post-development, and you can see from here, if you do zoom in, the solar panels are visible, but they're not visible from this site. And this is the site, this is existing, so there's no proposed solar panels on this. So the site viewed from Kennington Park. So you can see in there's a lot of other kind of industrial, commercial things going on, and that the solar panels would not be highly viewable. Okay, as I said before, the site is within Greenbelt and would not fall within one of the exceptions to inappropriate development as set out in the MPPF and local policies. So therefore, it would result in inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, which is by definition harmful to openness. The applicant has advanced very special circumstances, factors towards very special circumstances that overcome the presumption against this type of proposal. So there were 4 factors put towards VSCs, and these are assessed in paragraph 6.25 onwards of the planning report. So this need to address, so number 1 is the need to address climate change and achieve net zero by 2050. Secondly, the need for energy security. Thirdly, the availability of land with a suitable grid connection, because there's a grid connection actually at this site already. And the wider environmental benefits of the scheme, which will deliver significant biodiversity net gain well above 10% target. So the balancing exercise is summarised in paragraph 6.41, and it's considered that significant weight should be attached to the benefits of providing renewable energy, including reduction in carbon emissions. The need for energy security attracts some weight, and weight can also be attached to the suitable grid connection at the site and environmental benefits which will be delivered by the proposals. On balance, it's concluded that the benefits of the proposals clearly outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt and any other harm. Therefore, a departure from normal Greenbelt policies is justified in this case. So there are no objections to proposals on grounds of amenity, heritage, flood risk, or highways with appropriate conditions. So to fully conclude, the recommendation is to approve the application for the reasons set out in paragraphs 7.1 to 7.3 of the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. Before I open it up to questions for Lucy. I have a statement of support from Sian Hale on behalf of the applicant. I think that is the one that works. Okay, Sian, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening. The planning application seeks consent for the installation and operation of a solar park that would generate 16 megawatts of much needed renewable energy and a battery energy storage facility that would assist in helping to balance the grid in an uncertain energy market. The electricity generated by the development could provide power for up to 4,700 homes. In October 2019, the Council passed a motion to declare a climate emergency and to take urgent action to reduce its carbon emissions to net zero by 2030. The need for renewable energy aiding energy security is undisputed. Clearly, this should be delivered in suitable locations. The scheme has sought to make efficient use of an underutilised site for energy generation. Being located on a former landfill site, this development would utilise land which is largely inappropriate for any other beneficial uses due to the ongoing gas monitoring that is required on site for years to come. Through landfill gas capture, Infinis has already been generating low-carbon energy on the site for many years, the infrastructure for which is spread across the site, meaning that the site is far from pristine. The development of a solar park will mean that Infinis can increase the amount of zero-carbon energy produced from a single site whilst utilising existing infrastructure. In addition to this, the scheme will deliver a significant biodiversity net gain of 48%, which far exceeds the 10% target, by delivering a grassland which will replace the existing lower quality habitats on site. Infinis has spent over 2 years developing the proposals. Pre-application consultation was undertaken with the council, local community and elected representatives. This included writing to all households within 500 metres of the site, providing a consultation website with information on the proposal, a public consultation event at the Aveley Hub, and attendance at the Aveley and Kennington Forum. During the consultation process, no issues of concerns were raised by the local community, and no resident comments were received to the application. The final application is accompanied by a full suite of technical assessments, and we have worked with the officers of the council to address any issues raised during the determination process. There are no objections to the application from any technical or statutory consultees. Therefore, in accordance with the officers' conclusions, the benefits of the proposal are significant. The application accords with the council development plan when taken as a whole, and the planning balance is clearly in favour of granting planning permission. Therefore, it is respectfully requested the committee recognises and gives due weight to the benefits and takes this opportunity to make a positive difference for future generations by granting planning permission. Thank you.
Thanks, Sian. So before we move on to any questions for Lucy, are there any factual questions for Sian? Councillor Byrne.
Just one question I'm asked a lot. Is there any risk in battery storage to residents or people say it's going to blow up or whatever? Is there any risk? What risk assessments do we actually carry out?
So battery storage is obviously highly regulated, and there is, I think, a condition regarding a battery management plan to ensure that risks are minimised. There isn't any risk associated with the development. Clearly, the development's acceptable, but there is a condition which will seek to ensure that the management and the operation of batteries is under the legislation provided.
Councillor Polston.
Just as a question for clarification, really, the 4,700 homes it could potentially power, is that including the landfill gas capture, or is that additional to that?
That's additional. That's based on Thurrock's stats for the energy generation from the solar.
Thank you. Any more questions for Sian? Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's encouraging to see the 48%. This may be a naive question, but have you measured that?
So the ecologist has obviously been out on site and undertaken a habitat baseline of the existing habitat value of the site. Obviously the site's been closed and it's sort of naturally kind of grown, and I think the majority of the crop is miscanthus crop, which is quite low value. So that's the baseline that's taken, and then obviously there's a requirement to deliver 10%. We've looked at what we can do across the whole site, and obviously it's quite a large site, and we'll be improving the grassland, and then that will obviously provide a higher value. Essentially, it's 3 different categories, so it's sort of done on the type of habitat, how good that habitat is. So you might have a grassland habitat, which could be moderate or good condition. The existing habitat is of poor condition, and then Infinis will manage that habitat through 30 years to ensure that that sort of delivers the 48% we're stating.
Very well answered, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Sisterson.
Just a quick question. On the plans I've read, it's going to be fenced, and one of the reasons it said was to protect from deer. Is there any other animals that you'll seek to keep out with that fence to protect? Obviously, protect the equipment, but I wouldn't want it to become inaccessible to like rabbits and smaller mammals and things like that.
No, the primary reason is obviously for larger mammals and obviously security, but the fencing will be sufficient that smaller mammals will be able to sort of pass in between the fences.
Any more questions for Sean? Lovely, thank you. So now, any questions for Lucy on the report? Councillor Shinnick.
Right, thank you. On the A1306, will it be visible from there? You know where Willow Farm is?
Yeah, that was on one of my slides. Do you want me to go back to it? Share again. Okay, so this is Willow Farm, yeah, and this is a kind of photo of as is now, and the red line is the extents of the site. So that is on the ground, on the site, how kind of extent the solar farm would be. So this is existing, and then this is proposed, or post development rather. And I can try and if this will work. Oops. So this is a photo montage of what it would. So it's not really working, but in the back of the photograph on the raised land, it shows the solar panels, and they are very much blended into the landscape.
So this car park here is not going to be
The oh, you can vaguely see the panels there, I hope. So Willow Farm, the boot fair, no, that is way outside the site.
Any other questions for Lucy? Okay, so let's move on to discussing the application. Councillor Lydiard.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I think it's an ideal opportunity to use some land which has been filled by, you know, basically landfill, pretty toxic space in reality. There's probably gas coming up from underneath, and I really cannot think of a better use for the land, to be perfectly honest. So So I'm definitely going to be in favour of it. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Councillor Arnold?
Thank you, Chair. I will be supporting the recommendation. Clearly, it's a perfect site for an enterprise like this. I'm all in favour of this. I do travel the length and breadth of the country at the minute, and there are loads of solar farms popping up everywhere. It's worth pointing out, though, that I will always support something of this nature in the right place. But I am aware of another solar farm that was granted permission some months ago, which was an absolute tragedy because it's a completely different site and it's devastated that local community. But this one I will support. It's perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Shinnick?
Yeah, I will be supporting this application. I think it's a very good project. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Sisterson?
I suppose the only thing I'd say is that I think it's obviously a good project, but it's not directly beneficial to Averley as a community, because presumably it won't be powering their homes, although there are about 4,000 buildings there, so it is an ideal size. But and Averley, we've had to live with the landfill sites for years and years and years, and I think residents have got long memories, and they were under the impression that might eventually be turned into parkland for them. But it's just one of those unfortunate things that I can see the benefits. That's all really.
Lucy, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, Councillor Sisterson, a lot of the Averley 1, 2, whatever they were called, ex-landfill sites, as you know, Kennington Park is open and operational, and there was plans to change another part of the site, but unfortunately the gas monitoring has it's just too dangerous. But this specific part of the site was never in the plans for open space.
Just to come back to, sorry, Councillor Maney, I'll come back to you next, but just to come back to the point you made, Councillor Arnold, about the other site, is there anything about what didn't work there that might give you some concern for here? Because, we should do, if there's anything we should be doing, it's learning lessons.
Well, I think it's sort of fairly clear if people know the site, and I'm sure most people do. Location is key on this. It mustn't interfere with the views of residents, the impact that the construction will obviously give the residents, and it shouldn't obviously be. I need to be very careful how I say this. The other one I'm referring to is actually a fairly significant viewpoint, open land which is lost forever now, well, potentially. And this is obviously making good use of really a site that it lends itself perfectly for it. It's, we do need these solar farms, and making use of obviously a previous refuse site is perfect, but not on. I wouldn't be in favour of visiting very good agricultural land with a viewpoint, with a significance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maney.
Yeah, I just wondered, I don't want to put you on the spot, Steve, but I always listen to what you say when I'm making my decision. Have you got any views on this?
Yes, I have.
Can I hear them?
Over to you, Steve.
Okay. I suppose it doesn't come as a big surprise. So I guess I have a few views on this. The first one is the ladies mentioned about how safe these things are. The last one that caught fire was just outside Liverpool. I think it was 3 years ago, and it took them 60 hours to deal with it. There was another one that exploded in a more rural area in Hertfordshire, and they just walked away and left it in the end because there was nothing they could do with it because it had got into thermal runaway. So that just was left to burn. Fortunately, it wasn't near anything that was going to come to harm. So it concerns me that there's battery storage on site when this is not that far from where people live. And when those things do go up, the gases that come off of them, which are very toxic, travel. And as we know, if you look at, I know it's nowhere near as dramatic, but something like Chernobyl, when the wind changes, so does the way that goes. So it's a bit unpredictable where that would end up. So the last one that went up, just getting back to the safety regimes that they put around them, the safety inspectors had looked at it and walked around it and done a safety check on it 3 weeks before it caught fire. So although there is some regulation around this stuff now, frankly, it's very loose and it's generally decided by the industry, not by a third-party body. And there are a number of universities that have brought this point out with the government on a number of occasions, but it's something that seems to want to get shoved away. I can't think why. As far as this particular site's concerned, apart from being not that far from where people live, there was a time when there were 98 extraction pits in Thurrock, and they covered about 4,000 acres. And it's very rare that they kind of go back to where they were. So the landfill concept is great, except most of the stuff that was extracted ended up going into London, and then all of the stuff that came back out to landfill largely came back out of London, which, if nothing else, I think is somewhat inappropriate. The land was then restored. And now, so the landfill was for a specific period of time. And as I'm sure Councillor Lillyard will remember, it kept getting extended and extended and extended. So what started off as 20 years kind of became 30, then 40, then 50, and I think it ended up at 60. So the poor people that lived anywhere near there had to put up with 60 years, in fact, a lifetime and a bit probably, of heavy goods vehicles dumping stuff in there. So you could argue that a solar farm's an improvement on that. But frankly, they're still going to have to put up with vehicles going in to build it. Solar panels don't last 40 years. And anyone who thinks they do hasn't really looked at them. And I know they've improved, but that solar farm will have to be replaced at least twice, in my opinion, because the normal expected lifespan now is 15 years. So if you're going to get 40, the likelihood is every panel is going to get changed twice. So I think there's a bit more involved with this than maybe you see on the surface of it. I'd agree it's an improvement on a pit and it's an improvement on a landfill site, but it isn't going back to where it should do. And again, it's temporary for 40 years. That's not a bad lifetime. So as you asked the question, that's my view of it.
Thanks, Steve. Lucy, there's a number of quite major points there. Do you want to comment on any of them?
The battery storage point, I know we've discussed it on a number of occasions, and we have to take our kind of pointers from central government, and at this time it is, as with the appeal that was granted fairly recently, that the battery storage management condition is acceptable and robust enough to be acceptable on these battery energy storage systems. But I suppose from a personal point of thought, there are so many of these battery storage systems, so it's not just the ones that committee have seen are generally the ones which are connected to solar farms, but there's a large number of other storage bases, whatever you call them, around the borough. What other questions was it? I didn't take note. I thought we were on debate.
Sorry, Lucy, it wasn't a question and it wasn't aimed at you, because I know we've had this discussion previously. The battery fires for storage from solar farms around the world, there's a lot more than perhaps people realise. So they're a lot more common, and everybody's trying to sort of use a standard that they think makes sense until the next one goes wrong. So they try to then cover what happens next, and then that seems to work, and then another one catches fire. So it's a very relatively, battery storage on solar farms is a relatively new, a new concept from a safety point of view to manage. And largely, the university, Oxford University's report is very clear that it says most of the design of that has been done by the battery manufacturers. What it's not necessarily been done is tested by academics. That's the sort of current state of it as far as I'm aware. So it wasn't meant as a question. I apologise, sorry. It was just my view. So.
Okay, that's fine. And highways movements were mentioned in what you said, Steve. Yeah? Highways movements and how?
Well, the panels, the panels, the average life of a panel, last I looked, was 15 years. So if it's 15 years, if you've got 40 years of service, you're effectively rebuilding it and the first time, and then you're going to rebuild it twice on top of that.
Yeah. Okay. For highways movements, as it is with.
No, I didn't say about the volume of movements, but I don't know how many panels you get on a lorry. All I'm saying is we're sort of going back to when the landfill was there with vehicle movements. Not as bad by any means, but nevertheless, it's still a lot of land moves for people that live anywhere nearby. I'm thinking more from a local resident point of view.
Yeah. So the maximum number of HGVs to the site, obviously only during construction because HGVs aren't needed in the operational stage, is 3. And they'll all be directed, I don't know if Julian wants to speak on this, but they'll all be directed away from, they won't be going through Aveley, they'll be coming from the Wennington Junction. Okay, and I think the kind of use of the land was mentioned, and because of so there's kind of gas coming off the site, so these solar panels won't break the surface. They'll sit on top of that, and it is kind of what other possible use because the land is so contaminated.
Thanks, Lucy. I'd like to bring Sian back into this just on a couple of factual issues, because obviously I think it would be useful to members from what's been brought up to know, firstly, what is the life of a panel? So how many times can we expect to see this farm rebuilt? And secondly, if you can be a bit clearer to us, what are the measures in place to prevent or to manage a battery-related incident, if you could?
Yeah. So batteries, the design, obviously, take your point completely in terms of what you're saying. Obviously, recently the MPPG published guidance, which was provided by the Fire Authority, which is the guidance which we need to follow, and obviously it's regulated. There's a battery safety management plan, and I think that requires regular updating. There's information with regards to the spacing between the batteries, so if one was to catch fire, it wouldn't effectively cause the other batteries to catch fire. There's also, with regards to surface water drainage, that it will be designed on a hard standing to ensure that that drainage, that water would be caught and not, not infiltrated into the ground.
And our sites are remotely monitored.
Yeah.
Regularly. Sorry. Hi. Our sites are also remotely monitored 24/7 as well. So if there is any incident, we can act very swiftly to contain things.
Thanks. So that's as far as the batteries. I mean, supplementary question there. Gas seepage plus batteries, is that an issue?
It's not on the gas fields. It's on the hard standing, so it's not where the gas collection is, basically.
Thank you. And Steve's other point around the replacement required, or the frequency of replacement required, what is the life nowadays of a solar panel?
So the site will be monitored. So if there's a fault on a single panel, that will obviously be replaced. And that will be an ongoing for the 40-year period. The panels come with a manufacturer's warranty. I think it's 20 to 25 years. So they come with a guarantee anyway. So in reality, we don't know how technology is going to move on in 20, 30 years and whether we would replace the whole lot in one go, or whether that would be piece by piece as the panels deteriorate. Yeah.
Thank you. Good points. Any other questions, or should we, I suppose we have kind of gone into the debate. So unless anybody's got any other points they want to make or anything they want to come back on, I will read you the recommendation. And so the recommendation is to delegate authority to the Chief Planning Officer to grant planning permission, subject to the following. 1, referral to the Secretary of State under the terms of a Town and Country Planning Consultation England Direction 2024. And 2, subject to the application not being called in by the Secretary of State for determination. And so the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out in this report. That's the recommendation. May I have a proposer? Councillor Lydiard. And a seconder, Councillor Shinnick. All those in favour? All those against? And abstentions? Somebody answer that phone. Yes. That's somebody simulating a gas leak. Right, well, thank you, everyone. That concludes the business of the meeting this evening. And I now declare the meeting closed at, wait for it, 12 minutes to 9. Well, that's what it says here.